Namaskar, Jai Jagannath. So we know that AI systems are kind of built on powerful model, which are most of the time black box solutions. There are systems which are involved in trivial places like autocomplete in your keyboards or in like safety critical systems like autonomous driving. So there is actually a very clear requirement as to know the limitation of the model and the dataset that we use them to train. So to answer this or to like express the thoughts about this topic, we have Abhilash with us. So Abhilash is handling strategy and operations at Census.ai. He was born at Koraput and is a son of a teacher. He has his graduation in production engineering and also has worked at Google for a couple of years. He has done an MBA in international business from Japan and London and has extensive experience in AI research and augmented reality. So thank you, Abhilash, for taking the time to talk to us about such an important topic. So maybe over to you, and yeah, you can start.
नमस्कार शुभ सकाळ समस्तଙ୍କୁ धन्यवाद ए रविवार जोग देथिबा पई एवं ए उपस्थापना व्यवस्था करथिवर अंजन एवं अभिजीत धन्यवाद सो गुड मॉर्निंग एवरीवन सो वन ऑफ द रिक्वेस्ट आई हैव दैट मोडिया भलो भाबरे कहि पारेनी काहे मोर चिंता प्रक्रिया इंग्रजी तो सेति प्रत्येक शब्द को अनुवाद करने टिके कष्ट तो दयाकर टिके सहयोग करंतु एवं उपस्थापन समय आपनको जेकोसी प्रश्न आपण पचारि परिबे सो लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड so thank you for the introduction Abhijit and thank you everybody for coming so let's start with our presentation so I'll start with one of the very important note that what basically is responsible AI. So just like Abhijit mentioned on one of his Twitter posts that with great power comes great responsibility that Uncle Ben said Peter when he got powers of Spider-Man. So similarly, AI is something like that, and it is more powerful than the nuke, as Elon Musk has said. And we must be very careful, very diligent, and very responsible about the nuances and the power that is brings forth. So for some, the term artificial intelligence can provoke thoughts of progress and productivity. For others, the outlook is very less favorable. Many concerns such as unfair decisions, work can be replaced, and lack of privacy and security are perfectly valid, correct? To make things worse, many of these issues are unique to AI. This means existing guidelines and laws are not suitable to address them. Now, this is where responsible AI comes in, and it aims to address these issues and create accountability for AI system. So let me just pull up my screen and show you a couple of things. Yeah, I hope everybody can see this one.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So today we'll be speaking in terms of gearing up for responsible AI and maintaining model health and yeah. So I'll start by telling, just like I said, responsible AI. So we'll talk more in terms of what is responsible AI and how do we solve this particular issue. So responsible AI basically designs practices to develop, deploy, and scale AI for constructive causes, like for good intention, to impact people and society positively. It nurtures people's trust and confidence in the AI system. Now, the questions that may arise is AI supporting accurate decision? Is it violating any policy or privacy? Is there any mechanism to monitor this technology and its outcome? So these are the questions that are effectively addressed by a new governance framework that is called responsible AI. Now, using automated tools for model fairness, model monitoring, explainability, AI observability, that we call the umbrella term, AI observability solution, such as Centric platform provide here. It basically automates your ML monitoring, machine learning model monitoring for desired performance metrics. So it basically monitors all the performance biases, performance issues, violations, model drift, whether it's concept or data, and the data quality management, to keep that model fairness in check, to keep that bias in check, so that you do understand what's going on, how it's violating, and you basically monitor these violations. Now, we go into a next step, which is called explainability. Basically, it interprets why that particular violation occurred, like getting you to the root cause and giving you the ground truth. And it also explained that the reason behind, or the decision behind every model behavior, how your model is behaving. Now, this is what Census does, and it's if basically, if I can cover, it's AI observability, monitoring, model health, and explainability, which also covers in responsible AI compliances in check. Now, we have these three major questions that we have to answer for the industry. That is, what is responsible AI, that I answered recently, that a design practice to develop and deploy constructively AI. Now, why responsible AI is that important? Like, responsible AI is an emerging area of AI governance. The word responsible is an umbrella term that covers both ethics and democratization. Often, bias can be introduced into AI by the data used to train machine learning models. When the training data is biased, it naturally follows that decision made by the programming also are biased. The heads of Microsoft and Google have publicly spoken for AI regulation, but as this writing, there are no standards for accountability when AI programming creates unintended consequences. Now, the software programs with artificial intelligence features are becoming more common. It is increasingly apparent that there is a need for standard in AI beyond those that are established by Isaac Asimov in his three laws of robotics. The technology can be misused accidentally or on purpose for several reasons, as much as the misuse is caused by a bias in the selection of data to train AI programming. Now, why do we need responsible AI? Like, what is the need for it? And because we are doing all the research and we are very good with our data, and more the data, the processing, more insight that we generate. But when we talk about AI, we usually mean a machine learning model used within a system to automate something. For example, a self-driving car can take images from sensors. A machine learning model can use these images to make prediction. For example, an object in front of us is a tree. Okay, so the car uses these predictions to make decision. So you have to turn left or right to avoid the tree. We refer to this as the whole system, AI. Now, this is just one example. Who can use AI for anything from insurance underwriting to detecting cancer? We know the use cases. The defining characteristics is that there is limited to no human input into the decisions made by the system. All the decisions that I was talking that AI is making, there is limited to no human inputs. So this can lead to many potential issues, and companies need to define a straightforward approach to using AI. Now, responsible AI is a governance framework aimed to doing this precisely. The framework can include details on what data can be collected and used, how models should be evaluated, and how to best deploy and monitor models. The framework can also define who is accountable for any adverse outcome of AI. Frameworks will differ between companies based on their use cases, based on their insights level and the data that they're processing, but some will define specific approaches and others will be more open to interpretation. They all seek to achieve just one thing. Okay, so that is to create AI systems that are interpretable, fair, safe, and it is respectful of a user's privacy. That's a major one. Now, what is the aim of responsible AI? Like, what should be the aim for building this particular system? So we categorize into four terms, that is interpretability, model fairness, safety and security, and data governance. So let's deep dive into these particular segments. So the first area mentioned is interpretability. When we interpret a model, we explain how it makes predictions. An AI system could reject your application for a mortgage or diagnose anyone with cancer. A user would likely demand an answer, even these decisions are correct, just like we demand an answer to a doctor that, okay, why have I been detected with such a disease and what was the causes behind it? Similarly, a user can demand these answers. This is where I was talking about the every decision behind the model behavior. Some models are more accessible to interpret than the other, and it is easier to understand. So responsible AI can define how we build interpretable model, or when it is okay to be less interpretable one. Now, related to interpretability is model fairness. So AI systems can make decisions that discriminate against certain group of people. So this bias comes from the bias in the data used to train models. The more interpretable a model, the easier it is to ensure fairness and correct any bias. We still need a responsible AI framework to define how we evaluate fairness and what to do when a model makes unfair prediction. This is especially important when we are using less interpretable models. So for example, we are doing a research or a survey from the people from North India, and we predict that, okay, this is the way people should be behaving based on the data. But that doesn't apply to the South Indians. That doesn't apply to the East Indians. Maybe that doesn't apply to anybody from outside India. We cannot generalize these things because this will be unfair. There are a lot of biases because the group is selective. So it's very small, simple program example, but you can see it can create massive impact on your insights. Now, safety and security are other concern. So these are not new to software development. Okay. And these are all addressed by techniques like, we have techniques like encryption, software test, all of that. So unlike general computer system, the difference is that AI system is not deterministic. It's also dynamic. It's changing. So when faced with such scenarios, they can make unpredicted, unexpected decisions. The system can even be manipulated to make incorrect decisions. This is just a small fluke in algorithm or a model drift, then it will behave differently. So this is particularly concerning when we are dealing with robots, because for example, they are building cars for building robot, or they are building robots or building maybe something in the construction level. So if they make any errors, for example, in a self-driving car, that can cause injury or death. It is one of the biggest concern. Now, keeping that in check, we also should be respecting data. Now, the last aspect is privacy and data governance. The quality of data used is very essential. That's why we talk about data quality management and data quality monitoring. If there are mistakes in the data used by AI, then the system would make incorrect decision. In general, AI should not use sensitive data, for example, medical history, trade union membership, all of that. So, but these are the regulation and compliances that we haven't explored yet, like what sort of data we should be processing, what sort of data that shouldn't be processed. So in Europe and entire European Union, many of these concerns are addressed by GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. But outside Europe, they will need to be addressed by a company's own responsible AI framework. So in EU, they have this compliance and it's a standard for maintaining responsible AI, but outside it has to be under the company's own framework. So ultimately, what this all boils down to is trust. If users do not trust AI, they will not use your services. It's as simple as that. We won't use system that use the information we are uncomfortable with sharing or think it will make biased decision. We certainly won't trust if we believe it will cause us physical harm, just like we talk about robots. So explanation, accountability for those decisions go a long way in building this particular trust. And this need for trust is driving self-regulation amongst companies that use AI. So let's talk more in terms of what basically are the principles of responsible AI, that it should be human-centered, it should be secure, reproducible, monitorable, it should be explainable and justifiable. So these are the primary principles, and AI and the machine learning models that support it should be comprehensive, explainable, ethical, and efficient, that we earlier spoke on. Now, comprehensive AI has clearly defined testing and governance criteria to prevent machine learning from being hacked easily. So we have the encryptions, we have the security levels. Now, explainable AI is programmed to describe its purpose, the rationale, the decision-making process in a way that an average end user would understand, because not everybody is a machine learning engineer or a data scientist. You should be answering to someone in a business stakeholder. And this is where, when we are launching programs for social causes, so an ethical AI initiative have processes to seek out and eliminate these sort of biases in machine learning models. Now, they should be all running within efficiently, so that there will be a continuous monitoring and response quickly to changes in any of the operational environment it is thrown into. Now, we all talked about how responsible AI is, what is responsible AI, model fairness, but how do we achieve it? Like, what the things that should be doing with respect to achieve this particular framework, and how do companies can leverage? So I have collected a couple of points, and it would help to build this particular model and eventually bring this culture into anybody's infrastructure. So the first thing is human-centric design approach. Now, the way actual, yeah, so the human-centric design approach. Now, the way actual users experience your system is essentially to assessing the true impacts of its predictions, recommendations, and decisions. Now, design features with appropriate disclosures built in, like having the clarity and control, are crucial to a good user experience. Now, considering augmentation and assistance, producing a single answer can be appropriate where there is a high probability that the solution satisfied various users and user cases. Then having a model potential adverse feedback early in the design process, followed by specific live testing and iteration for small fraction of traffic before full deployment. Engaging with diverse users and use case scenarios and incorporate feedback before and throughout the project development. So this is going to build wide variety of user perspectives into the project and increase the number of people who benefit from the technology. Now, the second part, identify multiple metrics to assess and train and monitor. Now, the user would not be aware of all of these things. So the use of several metrics rather than a single one will help you understand the trade-offs between different kinds of error and experiences. Now, consider metrics including feedback from user survey, quantities that track overall system performance, short-term and long-term product health, click-through rate, customer lifetime value, respectively, all of these, and false positive, false negative rates sliced across subgroups. Now, you have to ensure these metrics are appropriately tracked for the context and goal of your system, such as a fire alarm system should have a high recall, even that means the occasional false alarm. Okay, so you have to be very diligent about what sort of monitors that you put in and what is the severity level of violation that it could impact your, eventually impacting your model decision and model behavior. And whenever possible, directly examine your raw data, because machine learning model will reflect the data they trained on. So analyze your raw data carefully to ensure you understand it. In case where there is not possible with sensitive basic information, so appreciate your input data as much as possible while respecting privacy. For example, by computing aggregates, anonymized summaries, so you can do all of these practices. Now, you have to understand the limitation of your data set and model, because a model trained to detect correlation should not be making casual inferences or imply that it can. So today, machine learning model largely reflect the patterns of their training data. It is therefore essential to communicate the scope and coverage of the training, hence clarifying the capability and limitation of the model. Communicate this limitation to users where possible. By better educating the user, you may also improve the feedback provided from user about your feature or application. Now, test. It's like the very important process, because you learn from software engineering best practices and quality engineering to ensure the AI system is working as intended, as trusted. So conduct rigorous unit tests to test each component of the system in isolation. Now conduct this integration test to understand how individual machine learning components interact with each other and with overall system. Proactively detect input drifts by testing the statistic of the input of AI that makes, so you don't make any changes in unexpected way. Now, and if it's possible for your industry or for your use case, use a gold standard data set to test the system and ensure it behaves as expected, and update these models, update these versions, and conduct iterative user testing as well to incorporate diverse users need in the development cycle. And eventually you will continuously monitor and update the system after you deployed these machine learning models, because this will ensure your model takes real world performance and user feedback into account. So the issues will occur, such as, we call that any world model is imperfect almost by its definition. So build time into your product roadmap and allow you to address issues, and consider both a short-term and long-term solution to issues. A small fix, for example, block listing, may help to solve a problem quickly, but may not be optimal solution for a long run. Balance these simple short-term fixes with long-term learned solutions. Now, before updating a deployed model, analyze how the candidate and deployed models differ and how the update will affect the overall system quality and user experience. The development of AI is creating new opportunities to improve people's lives worldwide, from businesses to healthcare to education. It also raises further questions about the best way to build fairness and interpretability, privacy, and security into these systems. So, concluding thought would be that responsible AI should be seen as an enabler of business growth and development. The continuous and ongoing process of maintaining responsible AI requires determination and top to bottom governance driven from the company board and executive management to be successful. Companies who implement responsible AI can see rewards in market growth and competitive edge. And by the end of the day, responsible AI is simply the right and moral thing to do for any enterprise. So I leave everyone with one question: where are you on your responsible AI journey? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Abhilash. Thank you for actually introducing us this framework called responsible AI, and and making us aware how maybe non-interpretable models can lead to like problems in generalization, and there are a lot of effects of that. And also maybe thanks again for introducing us the principles that we could follow to make AI models that we train in the future responsible. So at this time, we can open the floor to the audience so that you can take the questions.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much.
Right. So anyone who has a question can unmute themselves and ask their questions.
If someone, I'm trying to fill in the silence. I have a very social question in terms of responsibility. It's at the, like, when social problems are intermingled with technological solutions, we have two types of opinions that comes in. Some of them say all problems are solvable by technology, and some people say it cannot be solved by technology, right? So that is where I'm trying to bring in a little bit of understanding what I have in terms of Odia psyche, because I said Odia and everybody understands Odia, so I will switch to Odia now. So ame Odisha re ebi gote thought process achi je kichi gote kamo kariya pai hele चिन्हा परिचय लोक हेइथिले हेजिबो नै. So that something is a unspoken even spoken. So से जिनसटा अछि. तो आमे responsible AI जतबेले कहूछु, we are building powerful, आमे powerful system तयारी करछु, and then we are consciously making it responsible, right? So मोटिके bottom up approach अडको नवा पय चेष्टा करछु जे आमे responsible AI practices रो किछि सिखि परिबा कि जोटा social scientist माने नै परिबे, and then try to bring in a mass cultural change. तो एई प्रश्नटी मन को आस्तला आपनकर प्रिंसिपल जतले मु सुनुथली.
ब्यूटीफुल. हाँ, तो ए अप्रोच हमें इम्प्लीमेंट करि परिबा. सो द फर्स्ट स्टेप वुड बी डेटा लिटरेसी. तो जनरल अवेयरनेस एंड डेटा लिटरेसी जति पब्लिक जो मैंने भी यही डेटाबेस विषय रिसर्च भी करेंगे या फिर जो मैंने यार एंड यूजर्स से मानको जदी तंग निजर डेटा एंड कंपनी डेटा विषय कंप्लीट नॉलेज रहिबो then they wouldn't be hesitant of sharing the idea and even experimenting on the idea. The first thing is education and data literacy. Moving forward, building that trust would be requiring transparency. कहीं ना हमें जदी जो जिनसे को हमें देखी परिबा कि what is happening with our data or what is happening with the current model and what it is going to give us the insight benefits कौन है यारो. So giving that everything, the responsibility and accountability taken from the user, that for example a social scientist, social AI social scientist से जहाँ भी तार एक्सपेरिमेंट करती तो से जब ये जिनसे को एक्सप्लेन करी परिवे कि कीपिंग एवरी यूजर इन चेक दैट आई एम यूजिंग योर डेटा टू प्रेडिक्ट दिस particular thing and this is what we are doing. We are collecting data from every district and we are doing X, Y and Z. So you should be understanding that amaro purpose kono and ame kon kariyakku chahu algorithm kono. So if you keep these things fair and transparent, so every user can have that access to, okay, this is what is happening. So he should be clear in your mind that acha, there is nothing wrong happening, and if there is something wrong happening, you can ask that question to the person. So you should be having an open end-to-end communication channel as well. And this is where blockchain technology also comes in. So you have your smart contracts when you're accessing, so you can see every step what are the progresses happening with the current project. So you can integrate this as a next step to build more trust and more encryption to save data privacy, safety concerns and everything. And eventually for social scientists, if they can build enough trust for the kind of work they are doing, so of course say chinha लोग ही सब किसी परिवार. So there is wide opportunities. It's just that we have to explore it.
Awesome. धन्यवाद.
Right. मैं ଗୋଟେ question ପଚାର ଚାହୁଥିଲି କି like ଆମର ଏଇ ସବୁ data sets ଆଉ ଯୋଉ governance principles ଅଛି ସେଇଟା ସବୁ are also a reflection of human biases. Data ଯେମିତି ଆମେ collect କରୁଛୁ ସେଥିରେ always ଯେମିତି ମୁଁ perceive କରୁଛି world ତା ହିସାବରେ ମୁଁ data collect କରୁଛି. So can metrics that are calculated on these data sets really help in responsible AI? Kind of ethics is something that's different from people to people. So is metrics calculated on these data sets really a good picture?
Yes, 100%. So data quality management and data quality checks are very much essential for model building, because that is what your model has been trained on. Now, the data collection method has to be improved because we experience this fact that people scrap data from a website, people collect data unethically, people collect data which is not trustworthily given. So we have to address these issues first. Okay, so and that is because we don't know why these people are collecting data and what they would be doing. So if you know the intention and the cause, of course there would be hesitation, there would be a lot of compliance issues. But yeah, if we have a set guidelines and regulation in place, then it wouldn't be an issue. Okay, so we need those guidelines because we don't have it in place. So that's the first thing. Second, having this, if we collect data ethically, then of course the model will be fair and model won't be having these bias predictions. So we have to standardize the process, like from data collection to model processing, like model building. कहेंगे ना हमें जो वेरे data collect करो छो, that is not at the most ethical. Okay, maybe we are collecting public data. Okay, that's fine, it's publicly available, we're accessing it, that's perfectly fair. But when we are collecting private data or the survey data, sometimes the data are not willingly given, sometimes they are being scrapped for godforsaken reasons. So we need to address these issues first, and we have to set some guidelines that okay, this is not acceptable. And if you process anything with that data, like build that model, that is also not be trustworthy. Okay, so industry standards create କରିବାକୁ ପଡିବ, government standards create କରିବାକୁ ପଡିବ for data security and safety concerns. Of course there are spoken terms of these things and we are exploring AI in a very major term, but yeah, yaku bills and compliances format रे हम पाखरे रहया पड़ियो with every industry that is exploring. And we have to take in a general concern as well, like not only Indian company, even outside companies as well. So sometimes different company have their own compliances rule, data collection rule, data processing rules. So हमें ताको ध्यान रे रखी कि ही यही सब guidelines को prepare करिया पड़े, not only for India. So that is the way we can address this ethics.
So interesting କଥା ଟେ କହିଲେ ଯୋଉ government guidelines standard ଯୋଉ କହିଥିଲେ ଆମେ ଯଦି ଓଡ଼ିଶାରେ ଏଠି ସୀତାଂଶୁ ଭାଇ ବୋଧେ ଶୁଣୁଛନ୍ତି so so ଆମର ଯଦି ଓଡ଼ିଶାରେ ଆମେ ଆମର ଓଡ଼ିଶା ସରକାରଙ୍କୁ କହି ମାନେ ସରକାରଙ୍କର ପ୍ରତିନିଧି ଯଦି କିଏ ଶୁଣୁଥିବେ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ କଥାକୁ ଯଦି ଆପଣ କିଛି do and do not ଆମର ଓଡ଼ିଶା ସରକାରଙ୍କ level is a different thing than a private initiative, so there are two things. ଯଦି ଆପଣ ସରକାରୀ କେହି ପ୍ରତିନିଧି ଶୁଣୁଥିବେ ତ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଯଦି responsible AI policy, imagine government comes up with a responsible AI policy, what would be the outline of that in the context of Odisha? Odisha ro sendi kendi any recommendation? Then there is one more thing, like there can be n number of AI staff, like what principles they should follow, like Ajag Asimov ଯେମିତି ପ୍ରିନ୍ସିପଲ କରିଛନ୍ତି ସେଇଭଳି ଆପଣଙ୍କର କିଛି ପ୍ରିନ୍ସିପଲ ରେକମେଣ୍ଡ କରିବେ ଯେ ଏଣ୍ଟରପ୍ରେନ୍ୟୁର ମାନେ ଆଉ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ କ'ଣ ଆଡପ୍ଟ କରିବେ?
100%. So the principles I would like the government should be, taking care of is when an industry is opening in Odisha and exploring in the AI and talking about building AI and machine learning models, they should be easy to explore all the datas, and they should be encouraged that they should be indulging in the datas of Odisha, because we don't see these things coming. I saw one of the project with Google when they were doing a machine learning model to predict floods in Odisha and West Bengal. So we should encourage these and entrepreneurs to seek into Odia data and databases that are in Odisha first thing. Then only we can process the end users data effectively, like having those safety checks and having these things in guideline format. So that is the first thing. Second, I would highly encourage the government to take part in building these particular guidelines for infrastructure building, for compliance issues, for individual companies to indulge in these data. So we need, I wouldn't say strict guidelines, but relative guidelines. Okay, strict guidelines jodi karibe tale data security re issue bhi asibo, then entrepreneurs ମାନଙ୍କୁ ସେତିକି freedom ମିଳିବନି କି କିଛି explore କରିପାରିବେ, କିଛି opportunity ସେମାନେ discover କରିପାରିବେ. So that's the thing. And हमको ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ବି ଜିନିଷ ୟା ଉପରକୁ ଯିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ, which is data protection and regulation issues. ठीक ଅଛି, we need to address these things. Yes, we have data protection laws, we have regulations, but that is not very construct the way it should be. So we have to be having this principle relating to processing of personal data, like processing special categories of personal data, and how personal data relating to criminal convictions, offenses. So we have to set defined term that what are the data that should be accessible to government or accessible to entrepreneurs or not accessible. And we need to have this information and access to personal data guidelines, especially personal data guidelines. Many of the entrepreneurs who make their companies and build the models to serve the end user, serve the customer. Majorly, there are customers. Okay, so we need to be very much diligent with general obligations, like responsibility of the controller who basically builds these guidelines, and how data protection by design is like a default. So you have to set this guideline, something like data protection and responsibility is the guideline by design and by default. And there can be multiple controllers, there could be multiple auditors, and you have to check these personal data breaches to supervisory authorities, and you should be communicating these personal data breaches to data subject, and you should be prior consulting with these company before they get into monitoring or before they get into building models, all of that. Then the third thing I would like to address is transfer of these personal data to third countries or international organizations, because many of the countries serving foreign clients as well, and many of the companies are established in foreign as well. So we need a general principle of transfer. We need transfer on the basis of adequacy decision and subject to appropriate safeguard. So we need to set the standard. Also, independent supervisory authorities, like who should be taking care of these things, and the general conditions for members of these supervisory authority. What are the tasks they are given to? What are the powers and their activity report? If we can have these operations in place and have this transparent to the people, of course, we can achieve this responsible AI framework everywhere
Awesome.
and anywhere.
So you summarized it so nicely. I think we would probably have opportunity to kind of draft this, something where we can probably create an open document.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
all right. So thank you so much, Abhijit. Thanks for your last few minutes from you, Abhijit.
No, actually, we should be thanking Abhilash for taking the time to actually talk to us about this important topic. And it's really like we are at the edge of from going from just model inference to actually model interpretation. So we are looking forward to interacting more with you, more often with you. So with that, I think I would like to thank you once again, and this would be the end of the session. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting. And this is a wonderful place to share thoughts. And yeah, we are in the exploring session of AI, and I'd love to speak to you guys anytime. So
yeah, until
Dhanyavad.
next time.
Namaskar. Jai Jagannath.
Jai Jagannath.
Jai Jagannath.